the boardroom smelled like old money and fresh contempt. Nora Voss sat at the far end of the long glass table, the one closest to the door, which is where they always put her. Not because she asked for it. Because that's where you put someone you intend to dismiss quickly. She wore a blazer she'd bought at a consignment shop on West 4th, pressed until it looked like nothing was wrong. Her notebook was open, her pen was uncapped. She looked to everyone in that room like exactly what they had decided she was. A placeholder, a warm body, the kind of woman you keep around long enough to prove you gave her a chance before you showed her the exit. Her ex-husband Clifton Ray sat at the head of the table. He always sat at the head, even at dinner. Even at their daughter's school recitals, he'd find a way to position himself where the light hit him best. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Nora's monthly rent, and beside him sat his attorney, a man named Prescott Hale, who had the practiced look of someone who charged by the minute and knew it. On Clifton's other side sat his new girlfriend, a 26-year-old named Bryn, who worked in brand consulting, which as far as Nora could tell meant she posted photos of other people's products on social media and called it strategy. Bryn was laughing at something Clifton had said before Nora entered the room. She stopped laughing the moment Nora sat down, which is how Nora knew they had been talking about her. "We're waiting on one more," Prescott Hale said, checking his Rolex. "The mediator, she's already here," Nora said. The two men looked at each other. "The mediator from Hollenbeck Dispute Resolution," Prescott clarified, as though Nora had not understood. "I know who you mean," Nora said. "I am not waiting for her. I said she's already here. I'm just letting you get comfortable first." Clifton set his pen down. He looked at Nora the way he had looked at her for the last 2 years of their marriage. Like she was a small administrative problem he kept forgetting to resolve. "Nora," he said, his voice patient in the way a person is patient with someone they don't respect. "I know this is hard for you, but you and I both know how this is going to go. Prescott has the documentation, the business valuation, the asset breakdown, everything. You contributed zero to Ray Capital. Your name is not on a single fund. You signed the postnuptial agreement. This is, and I say this with respect, a formality." Bryn reached over and touched Clifton's forearm, supportively. "He really does just want what's fair," Bryn said to Nora as if she were a grief counselor delivering news. Nora looked at Bryn for a moment, then she looked back at Clifton. "I know," Nora said, and she smiled. Not warmly, not nervously. She smiled the way a woman smiles when she's already seen the end of the movie and is just watching everyone else catch up. She had not always been this calm. There was a version of Nora Voss who would have walked into that room shaking, who would have sat in the wrong chair and apologized for it, who would have let Prescott Hale's voice flatten her like paper. That version existed. She had lived inside it for 7 years, 3 months, and 11 days. That was the length of her marriage to Clifton Ray, and before she was Nora Ray, before the postnuptial agreement and the Tribeca apartment and the charity galas where she stood 2 steps behind Clifton while he shook hands, and she held his drink. She had been someone else entirely. They didn't know that. They didn't know that the woman sitting in the wrong chair at the wrong end of the table had, 8 years ago, built a financial modeling software platform out of a 1-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas, using a laptop she'd bought on a payment plan and coffee she made in a second-hand percolator. They didn't know the platform was called Clear Vector, and that Clear Vector had been quietly powering risk analysis for 3 of the top 10 hedge funds in the country for the last 4 years. They didn't know that Nora had structured her ownership through a holding company registered in Delaware, under a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know where to look. They didn't know, because Nora had not told them. She had come into the marriage as a woman who wanted a simple life. She'd sold her first company too young, been burned by the attention, and decided, deliberately and with full intention, to step back. She hadn't wanted Clifton's money. She had been attracted to his certainty, the way he moved through rooms, the way he made decisions. She hadn't understood yet that certainty in Clifton was not the same as wisdom. It was just volume. By the time she understood the difference, they had a daughter. Her name was Rue. She was 6 years old, had her mother's eyes and her father's impatience, and she was the reason Nora had stayed 3 years longer than she should have. She was also the reason Nora sat in that boardroom without flinching. Clifton had made a mistake 3 weeks prior. He had filed a motion claiming Nora had no independent financial means and was therefore seeking an inflated settlement out of desperation. His legal team had submitted documentation, statements, valuations, a neatly packaged argument for why Nora Voss Ray was, in their words, financially dependent and without verifiable assets. The problem was that Clear Vector had just closed a Series B $47 million, and the lead investor had issued a press release. Nora had read the press release in her car in the parking lot of Rue's school, and she had sat there for 4 minutes, just breathing. Then she had called her attorney. Not the one Clifton expected her to have. Not the overworked public interest lawyer from the referral list. She had called Vera Moss, senior partner at Moss Caulfield in Manhattan, a woman who wore reading glasses on a chain and had represented 2 Fortune 500 boards and 1 foreign government. The press release is going to make things complicated for him, Vera had said. I know, Nora had replied. He's going to be angry. I know that too. Do you want to settle quietly, or do you want him to learn something? Nora had thought about Rue, about the Saturday morning 3 months ago when Clifton had told their daughter, in Nora's presence, that Mommy was going to have to figure things out, because Daddy's business was complicated and Mommy didn't really understand how money worked. Rue was 6. She had nodded seriously, the way 6-year-olds do when adults say things that don't make sense, filing it away somewhere Nora hoped she could reach before it calcified into belief. I want him to learn something, Nora had said. The mediator from Hollenbeck Dispute Resolution arrived at 9:04, apologizing for the traffic, setting a leather binder on the table. Her name was Catherine Brow, and she was efficient in the way of someone who had seen too many of these rooms to be surprised by any of them. Prescott Hale opened his folder. He was the kind of man who liked to set the table before anyone else had a chance to, so he began speaking before Catherine had finished arranging her papers. We'll be brief, Prescott said. My client is prepared to offer a settlement of $22,000 in lieu of alimony, consistent with the terms of the postnuptial agreement, which was signed voluntarily in 2020. Mrs. Ray contributed no capital, no intellectual labor, and no documented professional input to Ray Capital during the course of the marriage. The agreement reflects that reality. We consider this matter straightforward. Catherine looked at Nora. Ms. Voss, your counsel? Nora placed her hand flat on the table. Vera couldn't make it today, she said. Traffic from LaGuardia. She's on her way. Clifton's jaw tightened. We scheduled this 2 weeks ago. We did. Nora agreed. And Vera will be here. But I'd like to say something first, if that's all right. Catherine nodded. Nora reached into the bag beside her chair. She removed a document, printed on plain white paper, and slid it across the table toward Prescott Hale. He picked it up. He read the first line. She watched his face. Prescott had a good face for a lawyer. Controlled, deliberate. The kind of face that doesn't give much away. But the second line made his eyes stop moving. What is this, he said. That's the press release, Nora said. From Kestrel Growth Partners. They let our series be our, Clifton repeated. He said it like the word was in a foreign language. Clear Vector, Nora said. I founded it in 2016. It provides institutional-grade risk modeling software to hedge funds and private equity firms. 3 of your competitor funds, Clifton, have been licensed users for the past 4 years. I structured my equity through a holding company called Novum LLC. The Series B closed 11 days ago at a post-money valuation of $160 million. The room was very quiet. Bryn had stopped touching Clifton's arm. Prescott set the press release down. He was doing math. Nora could see it. The kind of math that rearranges everything. You, Clifton said. He stopped. Started again. You had a company, during our marriage, and you didn't disclose it? Nora said. I disclosed it to my attorney, in 2019. Before the postnuptial agreement, which, it turns out, Prescott was signed under conditions your client created. Specifically, the representation that Clifton would file jointly and shelter my freelance income under Ray Capital's structure, which he did for 1 year and then stopped when it became inconvenient, without informing me. Prescott started to speak. I'm not finished, Nora said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't sharpen. It just stayed exactly where it was, which was somehow worse. I want to be clear about something, she continued. I'm not here to take Ray Capital. I'm not interested in Clifton's money. What I am interested in is the custody schedule, which as currently proposed gives Clifton primary residential custody and limits my time with Rue to alternating weekends and 1 dinner per week. I want that corrected. I want equal shared custody, with primary residence at my address during the school year, and I want it in writing before anyone leaves this room. Clifton's face had gone a particular shade, not red, not white. Something between them that had no good name. You don't have a stable home, he said. His voice was lower now. The performance of patience had dropped away. You live in a rental. You have no full-time staff. You work at all hours. Rue needs structure. Rue needs her mother, Nora said, and I have a 4-bedroom house under contract in Westchester, which I am purchasing in cash. I'll have the keys in 3 weeks. There was a sound from the doorway. Vera Moss walked in. She was 61 years old, wore her silver hair in a knot so precise it looked architectural, and carried a briefcase that had seen things. She pulled out the chair to Nora's left and sat down without removing her coat. Sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Where are we? We were just getting to the custody arrangement, Nora said. Good. Vera clicked open her briefcase. Prescott, long time. Prescott Hale looked at the two of them, then at Clifton. The look he gave Clifton was very brief but very specific. It was the look a person gives someone when they realize the landscape has shifted and no one told them. Clifton was not a man who received that look gracefully. He leaned forward. You built a company worth $160 million, he said. His voice had something raw in it now, something that might have been admiration in a different man but in Clifton had curdled into something uglier. While you were married to me, while I was supporting this family, and you said nothing. You supported this family for 3 years, Nora said quietly, and I am grateful for that, genuinely. But ClearVector was built before we married. It grew during our marriage. And you assumed, because I didn't talk about spreadsheets at dinner the way you did, that I had nothing to offer. You told our daughter I don't understand how money works. Clifton's mouth opened. She's 6, Nora said. She filed that away. Children do. The room was very still. The postnuptial agreement pertains to Ray Capital assets, Vera said, sliding a document across to Prescott. It makes no claim on assets held in Novum LLC, as ClearVector was not disclosed to Clifton as a marital asset because it predated the marriage and was correctly categorized as separate property under New York state law. If your client wants to contest that, we'll go to court, which I would not recommend, given the current press coverage. Press coverage, Prescott repeated. Vera slid a second page across. It was a printout from a financial news site. The headline was visible even upside down. ClearVector's Nora Voss on building in silence. I wasn't ready to be known yet. The interview had run 48 hours ago. Nora had given it 2 weeks prior, timed deliberately. Clifton looked at the article. He looked at Nora. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was the particular expression of a man who is realizing that he misread a situation not just once but continuously, for years, and that the misreading was not an accident of information, but a failure of attention. I want to talk to my client, Prescott said. Of course, Vera said. The two men stepped out. Bryn stood. She smoothed her blazer. She looked at Nora for a moment. I didn't know, Bryn said, and her voice was different now. Younger, more honest, about the company. He told me you were. I know what he told you, Nora said, not unkindly. Bryn nodded once and left the room. Vera poured herself water from the carafe on the table. How are you feeling? Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, Nora said. You can exhale now. The negotiation that followed took 2 hours and 14 minutes. Nora had expected it to take longer, but Prescott was a professional, and professionals know when a position is untenable. Equal shared custody was agreed to within the first 40 minutes. The financial settlement, which Nora did not contest beyond what the original agreement specified, was signed before noon. Clifton did not look at her when he signed. Nora looked at him. She looked at him the way she wanted Rue to look at things someday, clearly, without flinching and without letting what she saw determine what she did next. She didn't hate him. That surprised her, even now. She had expected to hate him. But what she felt was something quieter and in its own way more final. She felt the specific freedom of no longer needing someone to understand what they'd done. He didn't have to understand. She already knew. Walking out of the building onto Fifth Avenue, Nora tilted her face up. It was October, the sky the particular blue it gets in New York in autumn, sharp and cold and generous all at once. Vera walked beside her. Drinks? Vera said. I have to pick up Rue from school. Of course you do. Vera flagged a cab. Before she got in, she turned to Nora. That thing you said, about holding your breath for 3 years. Yeah. Try to remember, Vera said, that none of what just happened in there is the good part. The good part is what you do now. Nora thought about that on the drive to Rue's school. The FDR was moving for once, the river gray and wide on her left. She thought about the apartment in Austin. The payment plan laptop, the first version of ClearVector, which was basically a very elaborate spreadsheet with ambitions. She thought about the day she'd pitched Kestrel and the partner had said, walk me through the risk modeling logic. And she'd talked for 40 minutes without notes and watched him lean forward and keep leaning. She thought about Rue's face on Saturday mornings, the weight of her, still small enough to fit in the crook of Nora's arm. The questions she asked about everything. What makes clouds? Why do people cry at movies? If you love someone and they leave, where does the love go? Nora had not known how to answer that last one. She'd said she wasn't sure, but she thought maybe it didn't go anywhere. Maybe you just had to find a different place to put it. Rue had nodded as if this were perfectly sensible. She was a good kid. Nora intended to tell her that more often. The school was a low brick building off Amsterdam, surrounded by a wrought iron fence that Rue had once told Nora looked like the fence in books. Nora had asked which books, and Rue had said, all of them, which was not wrong exactly. She was the third parent to arrive, standing with her hands in her pockets, watching the doors. When Rue came out, she was wearing her backpack on one shoulder, the way she always did despite everything Nora said about spinal development, and she was in the middle of a conversation with her friend Della that she did not immediately end when she saw her mother. She finished her sentence first. Then she ran. Mom, she said, crashing into Nora's side. Della's hamster had babies. How many? 7. She named them all after planets, but she ran out of planets, so 2 of them are named Moon and the other one is just named Kevin. Kevin, Nora said. She says Kevin felt right. Nora held her daughter by the shoulders and looked at her face. 6 years old and absolutely full of the world, too full to be contained by it, too curious to be diminished by anything that had happened in a glass boardroom 4 miles south. We're moving to a house, Nora said, in Westchester. It has a yard. Rue's eyes went wide. A real yard? Actual grass? Trees? Can I get a hamster? Let's talk about the hamster. Rue grabbed her hand and they walked to the car. Rue talking continuously about the hamster logistics, about naming conventions, about whether a hamster named Kevin would know its own name. Nora listened to all of it. She listened the way she hadn't always been able to, when she was managing 3 things at once in a marriage that required her to be smaller than she was. She was done being smaller. 3 weeks later, Nora signed the closing documents on the Westchester house in a conference room that smelled like nothing threatening at all. Just coffee and copy paper and the lawyer's peppermint. She got the keys. They were heavy in a satisfying way. She drove out that afternoon, just her and Rue, and they walked through the empty rooms while Rue narrated what each one would be used for. The big room downstairs would be the living room but also the dance room because those were the same. The small room off the kitchen was obviously for snacks. That's the pantry, Nora said. That's the snack room, Rue corrected. They stood in the backyard as the sun dropped. The trees were October bare, their branches against the sky like something drawn in pen. Rue found a stick and began conducting an invisible orchestra. Nora sat on the back steps and watched her. Her phone buzzed. A text from her head of product, Soren. The Meridian Group wants to come in Thursday for the Enterprise demo. Said they'd heard about the Series B Big Fish. She typed back, Thursday works, send me their prep materials tonight. Then she put the phone away. The story of how it had looked from the outside. The quiet woman at the end of the table, the signed agreement, the graceful exit, would be told later, by Prescott Hale's assistant to someone at a dinner party, as the story of a surprise, a reversal, an upset. But from the inside it had never felt like a surprise. It had felt like compound interest. It had felt like what happens when you put your head down for long enough, in a room quiet enough, and do the thing you know how to do, and don't explain it to anyone who doesn't deserve the explanation. Clifton had called it mystery, had called her unknowable. In the last year of their marriage, when the distance between them was wide enough to have its own weather. He had said once, sitting in their kitchen at 11 at night, that he didn't think he had ever really known her. She had been quiet for a moment, then she had said, "You never asked," and that had been the end of that conversation, and in many ways the end of a great deal else. She had not said it to wound him. She had said it because it was true, and because she had learned, late but firmly, that the truth does not require permission to exist. It just exists. Quiet and patient and present exactly where you left it, waiting for the day when the room gets still enough for everyone to finally hear it. Rue had stopped conducting. She was lying on her back in the dead grass, looking up. "Mom," she said, "do you think the people who lived here before us were happy?" Nora considered this seriously. Rue expected serious consideration. It was one of her best qualities and her most demanding one. "I think they had good days and hard days," Nora said. "Like everyone. Do you think we'll be happy here?" Nora looked at the house, at the kitchen window, yellow with the light they'd left on, at the sticks and the bare trees and the 6-year-old lying in the grass asking the right question. "Yeah," she said, "I do." Rue nodded, satisfied. She sat up, picked up her stick, and pointed it at the sky like she was marking something important. And maybe she was. Somewhere across the city, in the apartment on Riverside Drive where Clifton had moved after they'd sold the place in Tribeca, a news alert came through on his phone. He opened it without thinking, the way you do at the end of a long day when your guard is down and the quiet is too loud. It was from a financial news aggregator. The headline read, Kestrel-backed ClearVector names Nora Voss as CEO, announces expansion into institutional market. There was a photo. She was standing in front of a whiteboard covered in notation that would have meant nothing to him. She was not smiling at the camera. She was looking slightly to one side, at something the frame didn't show, with the expression of a person who is already thinking about the next thing. He sat with the phone for a long time. Then he set it face down on the table and went to get a glass of water. He stood at the kitchen sink and thought about something she had said to him. Years ago, the second or third month they were dating, they had been arguing about something small, the plans for a weekend whose preference took priority, and she had stopped mid-sentence, looked at him with that particular clarity she had, and said, "I just want to do good work, that's all I've ever wanted. I hope that's enough for you." He had said yes. He had meant it at the time. He just hadn't understood, not really, what good work looked like from the inside of someone doing it. He had seen only the surface, the hours, the silence, the laptop open when he wanted conversation. He had read the evidence wrong. He had taken her quietness for emptiness. He ran the water cold and drank it and thought, there it is. The thing I got wrong. The thing I'll carry. He didn't call her. There was nothing left to say that would make the arithmetic work out differently. Nora drove home from Westchester as the last of the light went pink and then gone. Rue fell asleep in the back seat before they hit the highway, her head against the window, her face slack and still and entirely herself. Nora watched her in the rearview mirror the way she always did. The way she suspected she would keep doing long after Rue found it embarrassing, which would be soon. She turned on the radio low. Something from the 90s came on. She didn't change it. The road was clear. The city rose ahead of her in pieces, all light and height, and the specific American promise that you can become whoever you're working to become if you work long enough and clearly enough and with enough honesty about what you actually want. Nora Voss had wanted this, not the settlement, not the press release, not the look on Prescott Hale's face when he read the first line of the Clear Vector announcement. She had wanted to pick her daughter up from school in October. She had wanted a yard. She had wanted to do good work in a room where no one was watching and have it be enough. Even when no one knew it was there, it had been enough. It was still enough. And as the city opened up around her and Rue slept on in the back, dreaming of hamsters named Kevin, and rooms full of snacks and whatever else 6-year-olds dream of when they feel safe, Nora Voss drove forward into the only thing that had ever interested her. The next thing.